Okay, going back through the process again, we're going to pick a new part template. Again, I'm going to stay away from my inch and metric, at least on these first go around. And we'll double check the units. All right, and even though it all looks pretty good, and the origin is on. All right, so even though I'm not really doing the dual dimensions, I want to check those. And even though our drawing is in 2 decimal places, we can kind of use some of that geometry. Oh, my Kindle didn't launch. Okay. So a couple of the things that we'll be able to tell. Let's see if this is an inch or metric. The 1.50, and not really gonna see it on this one, but the uh, usually it will say metric or inch. If there is a partial, inch or the ANSI standard won't have a leading zero. Metric or ISO will have a leading zero. So that's one clue. Also, the metric doesn't often have fractional or decimal 0.75s. They do show up, but maybe not as common. So we'll talk more about the units and how I do the quick conversions for these. But if this was 3 millimeters, that would be 0.118. If this was 1.5, that would be about 0.100, a little bit under. 5.5 is going to be up around 220-ish. And 2.75 is going to make my head hurt, but it's going to be there about the 1.1 range. All right, so in millimeters, these numbers don't make as, doesn't necessarily make as much sense. So we're going to stay with the inch. And worst case for this group and for what we're doing, if you happen to draw this in metric, it's not that big of a deal. Later on, when we get into the assemblies and we're going up to that next level, we're making the drawings, it'll be a little more critical. But at some point, you will open a metric part and create the model in inch. And if you have to, there's ways to um, change the dimensions, and it's not that big of a deal right now. All right, so going into the front plane, we talked about going up to the sketch and hitting the sketch icon. Well, if I left click on the plane or the face that I want, I can look at the in context menu and go right into sketch. This is going to be faster than finding it on the command manager. All right, and it still shows up here. It tells me that I'm in the sketch, that, again, with the visual clues, my origin goes to red. I don't think I mentioned the confirmation corner. We don't necessarily need the confirmation corner going through the process this way, but at some point we will want to use it. Basically what this says is I am going to accept the sketch as is, or no, we're going to exit, and then it will ask if you want to save it or not. All right, so we're editing the sketch, and the sketch is under defined. So just clicking out into the area will clear the plane. And instead of doing the lines this time, I'm going to go with the corner rectangle. Any of these tools with a little down arrow is going to have other options. You don't necessarily have to pick the down arrow to get to those options. If the corner to corner is the correct, we can just click on the icon and it will take us right into the property manager for that tool. All right, so if I did want to change it and go from center to a corner, or out of position, 3-corner, then we get into center and also then the parallelograms. All right, we can change those out of the property manager as well. All right, so this time I want to look for that coincident, and it doesn't really matter which quadrant. It's largely the way that you see it. I'm going to stay up here in quadrant 1 for these examples, but as we progress, we will have parts that go into quadrant 4 and quadrant 2 and circles that are centered. If we wanted this to be centered on the through bore, that would be fine as well. All right, so let's find our coincident. So as I make the approach, it snaps and I see the little yellow icon with the coincident, and I'm going to left click and drag. If you click, that's fine as well. They're going to be roughly the same result, and for the rectangle, it's going to show us X position and Y position, and those are pretty close. Again, I don't particularly care that it is it is off, because once I go into the smart dimension, I click on the object, I place the dimension, type in the 5.5 and hit enter. Now it's that size. Same with the 3. And don't necessarily have to put in the point. I think it's just a habit that I have. So let's go with the circle. And last time I did the click drag on the circle, so this time I'll do a click. All right, so same result. There's a few little quirks with drawing the lines with the click, but it's what you get used to, and what you're the most comfortable with. So going up to the smart dimension, clicking on the circle, and this is going to be 1 inch. Place the dimension, enter the value, hit enter. All right, so one of the things that come up in the evaluation, I'm trying to make sure that I tell you what keys I'm hitting on the keyboard, because those don't necessarily show up and it isn't really apparent. So after a while, hopefully it's obvious, but we're not there yet. All right, so relations. I'm going to go ahead, and if I right click, I can select. I could also escape. And this circle is able to move, but it won't change size because the 1 inch. And if I click on it in the existing relations, the diameter shows up, and we had turned those off, the sketch relations off. So I have the coincident, the vertical, and if we go to the horizontal, and then the coincident, and then just a horizontal, and just vertical. Again, the endpoints are kind of a merge, which doesn't really have a relation um, to show. All right, so a couple of things that probably the easiest. Let's go with easy first, and then we'll talk about some of the other relations that we can get to. Under line, we have a center line. And if I go from corner to corner, I will see coincident and coincidence. Let's do that one. I'm going to do a left click, drag, and drop it when I see the concentric coincident at the other corner. As we drag along that line, you're also going to see midpoints. Now, I don't need three lines. This will be for example, but I can go from midpoint to midpoint, or midpoint to midpoint, and each one of those is then going to have its own midpoint. And if we did that right, they're all at the same location. So 2 choices. We can left click, hold down on the center point of the circle and drag it to the midpoint of one of our 3 lines. But we also have, when that's not convenient, the select, control select. All right, so if I select the center of the circle, hold down my control button, select one of the lines, I will get all of the icons in the context menu that are available between those for those selections. In the add relations then, if I don't recognize those icons just yet, I can come over and go, let's go to the midpoint. There's also an intersection. There's also picking any of the other items. All right, so this one went quite a bit faster in the process. We ended up with these extra lines. So if I wanted to get rid of one of those, I'm going to left click so that it highlights and hit delete. But if there was a dimension relation attached to it, it would warn me, hey, you're deleting something that could be, have a downstream effect on other geometries. So are you sure you want to do that? So let's see, on the right mouse, I mentioned the radius. So right mouse context, we're getting a lot of stuff here. So let's go with just the left click. We're getting kind of the condensed version versus the full list. I do have a habit of right clicking more than left clicking. But let's just say I wanted to see this as a radius. I can click the icon for display as radius, display as a diameter, display as linear. And let's see, preview. No, we'll just stay with the diameter at this point. So we have our geometry, and let's say that I realized I was in metric and I wanted to be in inch, and I come down and I change this. What that's going to do is kick us out of the sketch. It's going to have the same effect, and we'll do this. I'll do this. Everybody will do this at some point. It will, oh, I didn't get to the point of creating the extrusion. Right, so I need to get back into that sketch, or if the sketch is fully defined and complete, I won't see the little minus sign in front, and I have all my geometry, so I could go ahead and highlight and just tell it to extrude. And if we wanted to get back into the sketch, and there again, I have the habit of right-clicking. I could have just left-clicked on it, and it would have been the condensed. We can edit the sketch and go into the features and extrude boss base. All right, and then our thickness is 1 inch. And when I accept it, I get the geometry. So if we need to, we draw the lines, we draw the circles. If we can utilize the rectangles and the different geometry that is going to give us more geometry for the selection, we'll go that route. All right, so let's save. I'm going to do the P1-1. This will be my B, and throw my initials on it. If you followed along and did both of these, that's fine. If you watch the videos, it's your choice which way you want to go with defining these. The goal is to start to understand how the relations, where the relations are going to come in and come into play, so that we can utilize those rather than putting dimension after dimension after dimension into our models. So coincident, horizontal, vertical, and midpoint are kind of the four that we're up to out of probably a good dozen. So we'll call this video good, and our first project is finished.